Welcome to Don't Quote Me on That. One day we will have an intro, but today is not that day.
Hello. I'm Kalina, and welcome back to Don't Quote Me on That, where we kind of talk about movies. Although today I am using we in the royal sense because I am alone, if you noticed. No Eleanor here to say hello to you all. Our lovely Eleanor is on the entry committee for the Met Gala this year, and they had to call an emergency meeting to decide whether or not they should let young Gravy go, because while our man does have the drip, and he is 6'8", just think of the chaos he would cause with all the mothers there. So, she's doing great work for society. I'm holding down the fort here. Let's get into it. This won't be a terribly long episode because it's just me talking to myself. And although I do that all the time, a little bit different when I'm talking to myself and I know other people are going to listen to it. So, as you see from the title, I assume I titled this something that's legible and easy to understand. We're talking today about covers, specifically covers that I personally think are better than the original. I do believe it's 3 songs here. I can count 4. I got 4 songs in honorable mention. So we'll get right into it. I tried to cover a range of genres, time periods, artists, that sort of vibe. I do listen to a little bit of everything, and I do particularly like covers when they're in a different genre. Eleanor and I have talked about this before, and we really like covers because I think it's such a great way to, for an artist to showcase what inspired them. But I think it's even cooler when the cover is not in the same realm as the music the artist makes, because then they, for example, if their audience wouldn't listen to the artist normally, now that artist is getting exposed to a whole new audience, which is a word I used already. And also, I think covers are good. I think, they say imitation is the greatest form of flattery. I don't like when a cover is just a straight up copy, which is why a lot of these covers I think are better than the originals, because they took it and made it their own. There's a good way to do that, and there's, of course, a bad way to do that. But I still think making it your own is, even if it's not great, is better than just doing a straight up cover, because then we could just go listen to the original song. You know what I mean? Anyway, all that being said, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. We'll get into the first song. I started with this one just because, one, I think it's not as popular as it was, I would say, a year and a half ago, but also it's pretty popular. The most famous cover of the song is by a band that's pretty popular right now, and also this is my oldest song. So the first song I have here is Begging by Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, and I'm going to talk about the original songs first, and then I'll tell you which cover I think is better than the original. So we've got Begging by Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. And the reason I picked this, as I said, is there's a band that's pretty popular right now, Måneskin, those Italian dudes. I think they were, Eurovision? They won Eurovision. What is this, 2023? Jeez, I feel old. 2 years ago, I guess then, 2021, they won Eurovision. And then so I remember Begging was on the radio all the time, their cover of it. But I'm a Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons fan. I'm sure that might shock some people, but if you've listened to more than one of our episodes, that will shock absolutely no one. And so it's from the 60s. Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons are for those who don't know, are a doo-wop. I know the Wikipedia page for this song specifically says it's a Northern Soul. That's the genre. But if you look at Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, they're doo-wop, rock and roll pop band. But the song specifically is Northern Soul. But just so you have an idea of the sort of vibe that's going on. And also, Frankie Valli has a very distinct voice. His tone is very, especially for a man, he has a very unique tone. And I love a unique voice. That's going to come up in a couple songs later as well. And also kind of lends to why I picked those songs as the better than the original. This is K's Better Than the OG, which I'm pretty sure is going to be the title of this episode. If it's not the title of the episode, anyway, too bad. So I don't really know what I can say about this song that hasn't been said, specifically about his voice. I like that it opens with just him singing for the most part. We've got some violins, but the full band hasn't come in yet. We don't have any other instruments, just the violin. He says, "Put your loving hand out, baby. I'm begging." And then we've got the chorus, which is all of them singing and begging you, put your loving. And it's a very repetitive song. I will say that it's lyrically very simple, but I do think it conveys a good message. It's in the title, it's what it says on the tin. We're begging for love here. So he says, riding high, when I was king, I played it hard and fast because I had everything. You walked away and won me then, but easy come and easy go, and it would end. That's the first verse. Then we go back into begging you for the chorus. Then we've got the bridge. I need you to understand that I tried so hard to be your man, the kind of man you want in the end. Only then can I begin to live again. So, very clear theme. Like I said, lyrically simple. We get clear point A, point B. This is the story, yada, yada, yada. I like this song in its simplicity. I think doo-wop sort of music is, I don't want to say it's simple because that's reducing the genre in a way that I don't agree with. But I think it is simple, for lack of a better word, in the sense that there's not as much going on. They rely on fewer things to create this dynamic sound and this dynamic message, if that makes sense. Kind of like Frank Sinatra. I was watching a video about Frank Sinatra today, actually. And Frank Sinatra, kind of did, listen, I like him, but he kind of did the same thing all the time. You know what I mean? He sang songs. He sounded real sultry. The songs were usually about love. Yada, yada, yada. And that clearly worked for the man. Elvis, another, pretty distinct voice. He sang some songs. He had a persona. Yada, yada, yada. Everyone loves Elvis. So I think doo-wop music takes very, not limited, but fewer elements than you would especially have in music today, and does a lot with them. And I think Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons do that wonderfully. And also, I really like this song because it feels very modern. Like I said, it was written in the 60s, I think 67, if I want to get specific. Or it came out in 67, so it was written in the 60s. But I think, like, if you heard a band sing this song today and had no knowledge of the Four Seasons, you would think it was written, because in its simplicity lies its ability to not be tied down to the time it was written in. And I'm sure a lot of people probably heard the Måneskin version and thought it was their song, And I know I keep bringing up the doo-wop sound, and like I said, they're a doo-wop pop band or group, and I think this also walks the line very well of being very similar to their other songs. Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, they've got Sherry, Oh What a Night, songs like that, and what set them apart, one, is Frankie Valli's voice. But this song in particular, I think even if someone else was singing it, it sounds enough like their, discography, what they have in their repertoire already, while still being distinct enough from the sound of the time that it really set them apart. I've said a lot, but really, realistically, I don't have a lot of notes. I think it's a good song. I like it, clearly. I'm talking about it. However, and as much as it hurts my heart to say this, and I hope, no one comes crying sacrilege for this, I do think there's a cover that is better than the original Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons Begging, and that is not the Måneskin version that I've been talking about this whole time, but is in fact Begging by Madcon. Now, Madcon, first of all, are apparently a Norwegian hip-hop duo, which I did not know. One guy is an Ethiopian Norwegian TV presenter. This is per Wikipedia. We believe in strict academic research here. Don't quote me on that. So I'm reading the Wikipedia page now, and we have Yosef Wolde Mariam, and I'm sure I pronounced at least one of those names wrong. He's an Ethiopian Norwegian TV presenter and rapper. And then we've got Tshawe Bakwa, who is a South African German Norwegian rapper and TV presenter. And that is Madcon. And I will get you the year here. In 2007, they released a cover of Begging by Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. Again, if you did not know the original when you heard the Madcon version, I think this is another one where you would not believe that was an original song, and second of all, you would never make the jump of how they got from point A to point B, because this is no longer a doo-wop northern soul song. This is very much a hip-hop song. They've added rap verses in it, and I think the rap verses are one of the things that really stick out to me and make it better than the original, is because the rap verses feel like they were written at the same time the original song was written. I think they blend in so seamlessly. Like, sometimes I'm listening to the song and I don't even notice the transition from the original Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons lyrics to the Madcon lyrics. So one of the first rap verses, and again on the same theme. So he says, "Anytime I need you, you let me go. Every time I reach, you get me low. Every time I seek, you let me know. But I planted that seed, just let me go. 'Cause I'm on my knees while I'm begging, 'cause I don't want to lose you." So what's that word? I know what the word looks like, but I don't think I'm going to say it correctly, but they interpolate. They basically kind of cut in the original begging you theme into the rap verse. So I think that's another reason it really makes it such a seamless transition. And also, a really big thing about this song that I'm sure a lot of people probably would recognize it from is it was in Step Up. I want to say Step Up 3D. If it wasn't Step Up 3D, it was Step Up 2, but I'm pretty sure it was Step Up 3D, because it comes in the scene where Moose is dancing. Like, he sets off the sprinkler and then he's dancing in the water, and the water flashes on the camera. So I'm pretty sure that was supposed to be a 3D effect. I really like the Step Up movies. That's a whole other episode we could do, or I could do by myself. But I think Madcon just take this to another level. Just from the very beginning, you can tell you're about to listen to something different. The opening lines are in the opening where he says, "I'm begging." In the Madcon version, he's got this like very nice rasp or like growl almost in his voice, and like just it's chef's kiss. And just from then, you're like, oh, I'm in for a treat. At least that's what I think every time I hear the song. I never get sick of it. It's on like almost every playlist I have. It's on my like shower playlist, on my gym playlist. It's just so fun. And I talked a little bit earlier about it being like the doo-wop sound being a little simpler. They take less elements but do a lot with it. And here there's less vocals, so they're like reducing it. They've also obviously added things instrumentally and like to make it sound more like a hip-hop song than what it is originally, but it still has the same effect, even though they have subtracted something that was essential to the original. And if for no other reason, this to me is better than the original because it's so out of the box. As I was saying earlier, I like a cover. I don't think a cover should just be an imitation, though. And this is a great example also of doing a cover of music that inspires you, that's from like a genre you wouldn't expect. I'm sure a lot of I highly doubt there's a lot of Madcon fans that are avid listeners of the Four Seasons. So I'd like just opening up a whole new world of possibilities. It's nothing is there's no they always say there's no original thoughts anymore, and so this is like I think when you have a cover like this is a promising way to look at it. It doesn't make you sad that like everything that could be done has been done. This is like motivating because everything that has been done we can take inspiration from and grow from, and like even if everything is derivative of something else, that doesn't make it any less interesting or worthy of attention and praise. I think I've said enough things about begging. Anyway, if you haven't heard the Four Seasons version, I'm sure a lot of people heard the Madcon version and, like I said, the Måneskin version. So if you haven't heard the Four Seasons version, I think it's worth a listen, if only just to hear how starkly different the two of them are. And also, I love talking about how the Måneskin version is a cover of the a cover of the Madcon version. But the Madcon version, even though it's so different from the Four Seasons, has to be a cover of the Four Seasons version because that was the only version that existed. But Måneskin isn't a cover of the OG, it's a cover of the cover. It's a whole little loop. I could go on forever. But anyway, I will instead go to the next song, which is from an artist I know 2 songs by, and this is one of them. And I'll be honest with you, before I did this video, I probably listened to the original of the song once or twice. It's When I Get You Alone by Robin Thicke. The only other thing I know about Robin Thicke besides him singing this song is he did Blurred Lines some years ago, and everyone has mixed feelings about Blurred Lines. I personally, I think it's a fun song. I can see the implications and why people don't like it. But sometimes I think we don't need to take media super seriously. It's a fun little song. Those are all the things I know about Robin Thicke. Not my usual cup of tea, is what I will say. So when I was listening to the song, I didn't realize his voice is a lot better than I realized. Much different to the last song, Frankie Valli. Like I said, has a very distinct and unique voice. Robin Thicke, not so much. His voice he's nice. He's a singer, you know what I mean? But it's not like I would hear Robin Thicke singing and off the bat go, oh yeah, that's Robin Thicke, like you would for other artists who are known for their voice. And I liked the funk feel of the song. I didn't, like I said, I've heard the cover I'm going to talk about, which I'm sure a lot of people probably guessed what cover I'm going to talk about. But this is a very funk song. I think it's classified as R&B funk song, but it's got a very funk vibe, which I wasn't expecting. And again, I like the backing vocals. The thing I liked most about the original, which obviously is again because it's in the arrangement, but basically this song samples Beethoven. And I think sampling Beethoven in a funk and R&B song is a vibe. It's such a vibe. Like I said, I love crisscrossing genres. I think crisscrossing genres is the best thing ever. So sampling, again, you wouldn't expect it. I'll get you some of the lyrics here. We've got Robin Thicke, When I Get You Alone. Oh, another interesting thing I did pull out is apparently this is his debut single from 2002. So, I think this is a very strong opening for an artist. No one's ever heard anything from Robin Thicke before. This is the first thing he's coming out with. I think this is a great decision. So the opening is, baby girl, where you at? Got no strings, got men attached. Can't stop their fiending for long. Which, I just like the word fiending. That's just a fun word. And he says, you making dogs want to beg, breaking them off your fancy legs, but they make you feel right at home now. See, all these illusions just take us too long, and I want you bad, because you walk pretty, because you talk pretty, because you make me sick, and I'm not leaving till you're leaving. And then the chorus is, when I get you alone, you'll know, baby, when I get you alone. So basically he's just like, as he said, okay, he said it best. He's fiending for her, and when he gets her alone, the things he will do. It's a fun little vibe, a little bop. There's some nice, I like the pause. There's a pause when he sings and he says, ain't you got some photographs? And he slows down. So the instrumentals are kind of almost non-existent. And he slows down his voice to the point where it almost sounds like there's an effect on his voice, but he just does that naturally. And I think that's really nice. And then also I like how his voice changes and his tone changes as he sings the song, because the song is very sensual, I think would be a good word. And he gets real sultry before the second chorus that's the word, before the second chorus when he sings, and I want you so bad, because you walk pretty, because you talk pretty. He's just really putting the emotion into it. And I think emotion is sometimes, especially depending on the genre, like I've said this about pop punk music before, sometimes emotion is more important than actual vocal ability. Robin Thicke does have vocal ability, but I like that he can make those subtle shifts in his voice to then convey the story better, I don't like he does shift into a higher key briefly before he goes into the final pre-chorus. I don't really like that. I didn't think that fit the vibe of the song. It kind of took me out of it for a second. But I thought the backing vocals overall were very nice. What was another thing that was interesting to me was this had 1.9 million views. The video, at least I saw on YouTube, and the cover I'm going to talk about had, I think, 1.5, I believe it was, which came out years and years later. And to the great embarrassment of Kalina here, it is a cover from Glee. But I don't think anyone would disagree with me when I say that Blaine Anderson in Glee, played by Darren Criss, does a fantastic cover of When I Get You Alone. And I would listen to Darren Criss sing pretty much anything. I think his character Blaine had all the best covers in Glee, save for a few here and there. So I think he just brings an element to everything he does. He has a lovely voice. Not one that's necessarily easily identifiable, but he's fun to listen to. I think he brings a lightness and a nice little vibe to everything he does. And also, another reason I really like this better than the original is it's a cappella. So everything we hear instead of instruments, we're hearing, the a cappella group, which I think is the warblers singing behind him in the context of the show. And I think that just adds a new element to it. It makes the backing vocals, which I liked in the original song, it makes them fit in much more seamlessly because everything is vocals now. But what we did have to give up is some of that funk feel I mentioned earlier. Basically, just human voices are amazing and can do fantastic things, but like you can't imitate, for the most part, by and large, people can't imitate an instrument perfectly. So the instruments that were giving the song the funk feel kind of take a backseat in the cover, but I think it more than makes up for it everywhere else. And whoever is singing the bass in this song is a star. I didn't notice it, and like when I listened to this song just casually, I don't notice it, but when I was listening when I was listening to it today to prepare for this, the bass really stood out to me. So whoever is singing bass in When I Get You Alone in Glee, 10 out of 10. I would also listen to them sing anything. I'm a bass girly. I love bass. I think every song, I don't care the context, the genre, the artist, I think every song could have more bass in it, personally speaking. Those are just my personal feelings. Darren Criss just does such good, I don't know. It's like Glee, to me, Glee and Twilight exist in like similar spaces where like, are they good, well made like pieces of media? Not exactly. Okay. Do they stand the test of time, like in terms of social conventions and like what's, correct and polite? Not really. Okay. Is it a little embarrassing to say, I really like Glee or I really like Twilight? Yeah, but like, there's something about it. Okay. Those are cult, like Twilight, I think in a couple years, even now, I think you could call it, but like in a couple years for sure, it's going to be like a cult classic. And I think Glee would be as a TV show equivalent of that, which is very interesting because they're wildly different things. And I'm getting off topic. I don't think I should be allowed to talk about Twilight by myself. I don't think I should be allowed to talk about Twilight with Eleanor either, but definitely shouldn't be allowed to talk about Twilight by myself. I have a lot of thoughts. I'm going to upset some people. So we'll go to the next song. Oh, if I said Begging was my oldest song, I was definitely 110% wrong because I did this and then immediately forgot what I put on this list. So anyway, next song, we're hopping over to a totally different genre again. That's just how we do here on the Kalina show, which is what you all signed up for. I'm so sorry. We've got Nothing by Townes Van Zandt. Townes Van Zandt was born in the 40s. So the song, I believe, is from the 50s. Let's see if I can get you a specific date here. I can't, but not the 50s. I'm sorry, the 60s. So actually, probably the same time as the Four Seasons, Begging. But anyway, long story short, this is a country song. Townes Van Zandt, country singer from Fort Worth, Texas. He's like a folksy, bluesy sort of guy. And I was watching this very interesting video about him, actually, if anyone wants to check it out. It's by Polyphonic on YouTube. And he was doing a video about Poncho and Lefty, which I would argue was Van Zandt's most popular song. That's also got a very famous cover by Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard, which most people probably know that version, but it is a Townes Van Zandt song, and that is his most popular song, I would argue. I think you could make a case for that. But anyway, I was watching the Polyphonic video, and he was talking a lot about how Van Zandt had a sad life, in the sense that he spent a lot of time on the road touring, and so he was in bars and motel rooms all by himself. And then also he had substance abuse issues, and he was bipolar. He was diagnosed as being bipolar. So not a life of solitude and loneliness, one could argue. I do think there's a difference between solitude and loneliness, and a difference between feeling lonely and being alone. And but I'm sure Van Zandt experienced both ends of the spectrum there. But this is what my mother and I like to call talk singing. And that's not just in Nothing, that's just in every song Townes Van Zandt has. He talks, sings, which isn't a bad thing. I think because of the genre and the stories he tells, it works. But the problem is Nothing is a sad song. And then Towns Van Zandt doesn't sound happy. So he's talking to you and he's basically essentially reading these very moving but very depressing lyrics. And I'm just not always in the mood to be depressed. So I don't always reach for this, this version, the original version first, because like it's a little bit of a lethal combo. Some of the lyrics here, and also this is another. I like country. Like country music, I think, is like pinnacle of storytelling songs, and so he tells a nice little story here, and keeps it very abstract in the things he's talking about without making it seem unrealistic in terms of language. So the first verse he says, and there's not really a real chorus also, which is another thing I find interesting about this song. He says, "Hey mama, when you leave, don't leave a thing behind. I don't want nothing. I can't use nothing. Take care into the hall, and if you see my friends, tell them I'm fine, not using nothing." And then, so the repetition that serves as quote unquote the chorus here is just the repetition of I can't use nothing, I don't need nothing, 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 which is the title of the song. Because then he goes into the second verse and he says, "Almost burned out my eyes and threw my ears down to the floor. I didn't see nothing, I didn't hear nothing. I stood there like a block of stone, knowing all I had to know, and nothing more, man, that's nothing. Cause brothers, our troubles are locked in each other's arms, and you better pray they never find you. Cause your back ain't strong enough for burdens double fold. They'd crush you down into nothing." And then we get the last verse, which has the last two lines are the reason I can't listen to the Towns Van Zandt version too many times. He says, "Being born is glowing blind and bowing down 1,000 times to echo strung on pure temptation. Sorrow and solitude, these are the precious things and the only words that are worth remembering." So as I said, I was watching a video, and I think if you think about it in the context of his life, spending a lot of time alone, being bipolar, having these struggles that are in ways universal, but also in ways deeply, deeply personal, is hard. And so he sings about sorrow and solitude, and solitude isn't inherently bad. I think loneliness inherently is terrible. Solitude, not so much, but he sings about sorrow and solitude and how they're the precious things. And I think in a sense that sometimes people say, feeling anything is better than not is better than feeling nothing at all. But also feeling sorrow and solitude isn't fun, and that these are the only words worth remembering. But also, I think it links back into the idea he says in the very opening lines of the song is, "Mama, when you leave, don't leave a thing behind," which I think one partly relates to the idea of when you die, you can't take it to the grave. So he's saying, don't leave anything behind because one, I have a life alone. I'm not using any of these things you're going to leave me. And also when I die, I can't use anything that you're going to leave me because I'll be dead and I can't have it. And in a broader sense, I think country music is I like country music, especially this kind of country music it's universally relatable. Like I said, it's like the peak of storytelling songs. And obviously when an artist writes a song, they write about their own life and their own experiences. But if every song was hyper specific, no one would listen to music. Because if I wrote music and I wrote about, my specific apartment block, living in this specific city in this specific country, no one would get that. But if I wrote a song instead about the general feelings of living away from home and living in a foreign country, that's a story that lots of people can relate to, living away from home and living in a different country and living in a country you don't speak the language. But then on an even broader scale, a lot of people can relate to the feeling of feeling out of place and being away from your comfort zone, which can take many forms. In my case, it's living abroad. For someone else, it might be, trying out for something or going for a job or something like that. So I think storytelling songs are so powerful because they're allowed to get a little bit more specific while still without losing that element of relatability. But this one isn't too terribly specific. It's more I think the things you ponder when you're alone, funnily enough. He talks about solitude, but God and death and and what you take to you and what's left behind when you're gone and all that stuff, which is nothing, as the title says. But as I said, Townes Van Zandt, talk singing, a little depressing, a little hard to get into at times, especially considering the context. So the cover I think is better than the original here is Coulter Wall does a cover of Nothing. Now, most people know Coulter Wall for his song The Devil Wears a Suit and Tie, but more specifically, most people know him because he has a very distinct voice. This man was like 23, okay, and sounded like he'd been smoking for 50 years. A lot of people like say he sounds like Johnny Cash, which I wouldn't necessarily. I think because of Johnny Cash's legacy, for lack of a better word, that's a bold statement to make. But my man sounded like, you know, he had kids and worked in the coal mine and been smoking a pack a day for 50 years, at least, at, you know, the ripe old age of 23. And while that is a natural sound, I have seen some interviews of Coulter Wall saying that he doesn't force it as much anymore, if that makes sense. He does sing. He does have a very deep singing voice, but I do think he leaned into it a little bit more heavily, especially when he was first coming out. So anyway, if you haven't heard Coulter Wall, just to get a sense of what I'm talking about, The Devil Wears a Suit and Tie is, I think, his most popular song. I like Kate McCannon. I think that's a good song. And Living on the Sand. Oh, Ballad of a Law Abiding Sophisticate. That's the song. That's my favorite Coulter Wall song. So any of those, great. Get a sense of his voice. He also does a cover of Big Iron. That's a classic. Everyone knows Big Iron. So I just also think off the bat, instrumentally, this has more personality. The guitar just feels a lot more. The guitar in the Townes Van Zandt version very much suits the tone of his voice in terms of the monotony, I suppose, is a good way to phrase that. Whereas here, the guitar just has like so much more life and personality, like much more twang, but it doesn't take away from the message of the song. I mean, I think everyone has a song they like that's like, you know, where the lyrics and the sound are different. Like it might be a really fun song, but the lyrics are sad, or vice versa. So as here, I think the music being a little bit, and it's not peppy by any means, just compared to the original. The music being a little bit cheerier doesn't take away from the overall message of sorrow and solitude. Coulter Wall, because of the song arrangement, it's very hard to be full on singing. But Coulter Wall is very much on the far end of singing, he's very far on the singing end of talk singing, is what I'm trying to say. And Coulter Wall's voice is just, like I said, from another planet. A lot of these, I think everyone I've said, is just their voice brings something different, whether it's distinct or not. You know, that's part of the reason that makes it so personal. Is everyone, like, I like Steve Perry from Journey. I think he's got a great voice, very distinct. I know a lot of people don't like Steve Perry's voice. So, you know, I think the voice thing is definitely me, whereas some of the other things I think other people could appreciate in the cover, even if they don't agree with me that the cover is better than the original. And I like a good rasp. I realized doing this list because he also has a nice rasp on the back of his voice when he says, "'cause your back ain't strong enough," when he says back. But again, it's not forced. It's just it comes out naturally when he's singing. And I touched on this a little bit when I was talking about Robin Thicke and how he like added emotion in the end to fit the vibe of the song. In the Townes Van Zandt version, the vibe is the same the whole way through, whereas with Coulter Wall, I feel like by the end, he's almost trying to convince himself sorrow and solitude, these are the precious things and the only things where, like, it's almost like he's trying to convince himself that it's okay that he feels these things, where in the Townes Van Zandt version, I think he's, like, resigned to feeling like that, and that's just how life is. Whereas here, it's like, I feel like Coulter's almost hoping for better, but trying to convince himself because he's not going to get it. So, if you feel like being depressed, I mean, honestly, if you feel like being depressed, you can listen to either version. But if you feel like being more depressed, Townes Van Zandt is the man for you. I'm just a Coulter Wall fan, I think. Last song, and then I've got an honorable mention. We've got When I Grow Up by the Pussycat Dolls. So, like I said, I was just trying to cover all the genres. I'm not a Pussycat Dolls person. I couldn't tell you anything about them other than I know Nicole Scherzinger was in that band, is in that band. I think they've come back. Don't quote me on that though. Yeah, Pussycat Dolls. The song is from 2007, 2008. It's quantified as a electro pop R&B song. I would have called it a pop and R&B song. So yeah. Another case of a voice that's not necessarily unique, doesn't necessarily stand out, but it is strong. Again, if I heard Nicole Scherzinger singing, I wouldn't be like, oh, that's Nicole Scherzinger, but I'd be like, that person has a nice voice. Actually, I just remembered, I've seen her do a live performance. I don't remember what the context was, but like a live concert for Phantom of the Opera, and her voice was wonderful there. But so yeah, she's got a very strong voice, very powerful vocals. I don't think that's like a thing, something that can be argued with. Also, I always think the Pussycat Dolls were like Nicole Scherzinger and backup singers, but like from what I'm reading, it was supposed to be like a equal. I don't know. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Anyway, the opening of When I Grow Up is boys call you sexy and you don't care what they say. See, every time you turn around, they scream in your name. And then we've got the chorus. I've skipped a little bit, but like it's all around the gist of you don't want to be nameless. When you were younger, you wanted to be famous. So chorus is, when I grow up, I want to be famous. I want to be a star. I want to be in movies. When I grow up, I want to see the world, drive nice cars. I want to have groupies, which like it says groupies, but I'm 1,000% sure the lyric is boobies. But like, that's just me. You can't convince me that's not what that lady said. Anyway, then she says, when I grow up, be on TV. People know me, be on magazines. When I grow up, fresh and clean. #1 chick when I step out on the scene. And then she says, but be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. You just might get it. You just might get it. So I like it's a fun song. It's like a pop song. I especially from 2000, like late 2000s, I'm not expecting a lot of depth in my lyrics, okay? I'm not expecting it to be mind-blowing and like, sure, it's going to tackle personal things if they're writing the music, but I'm not expecting like a self-reflection. But I do like that we had the little bit of like, when I was little, I want to be famous, which I'm sure everyone could probably say at some point in time. But then you got that little bit of just like, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it, which is an oft quoted thing. One thing that comes through in the song is they go ha 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 ha, like not the backup singers, but the other people that aren't Nicole Scherzinger. So Nicole Scherzinger will go, now I've got a confession. The backing vocals go, ha, 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 ha. When I was young, I wanted attention. Ha. I don't like the ha, 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 ha's. I don't really think they fit in very well. Totally different effect to backing vocals and like begging that I was talking about, where in both cases I felt like they got imbued seamlessly. I hope I'm using that word correctly. But it's a fun song. It's like I said, it's a pop song from the 2000s. It's what you expect. It's it's what you expect is what you get. I like the effects and the delivery on, like I said, be careful what you wish for. And one thing I found very interesting about the song, instrumentally, is when you get to the breakdown, I guess the bridge, it doesn't, like usually there's a big difference instrumentally between the choruses and the verses and then the bridge just to set it apart. And then you get back into the sound you've been hearing this whole time. Whereas the bridge to me sounds exactly the same. The only thing that's different is there's a bit of an effect on her voice. So the bridges, I see them staring at me. Ooh, I'm a trendsetter. Yes, this is true, because what I do, no one can do it better. You can talk about me because I'm a hot topic. I see you watching me, and I know you want it. So her vocals are what make it stand out as the bridge versus the instrumentals. But overall, I think this doesn't stand out to me, partly because I think the Pussycat Dolls have better songs. Like I said, I'm not an avid Pussycat Dolls listener, but I mean, everyone knows, don't you? Don't you wish your girlfriend was hot like me? Like, I don't know how, like, who doesn't know that song? Buttons, another good song by then. So I think they have like better sounds and stronger examples of what they can do. So that's another reason When I Grew Up doesn't really stick out to me. And I'm going to do a complete 180 here in the cover that I think is better than the original. Coming off of an album, or series of albums, I should say, I talk about, and Eleanor and I talk about very frequently, which is the Punk Goes Pop albums. And I personally think When I Grow Up by Mayday Parade is better than the original by the Pussycat Dolls. One, having a guy sing this song is just fun. I don't like when singers do gender swapped covers and then change the the pronouns and such. And he doesn't do that. He does it for one thing, but I think it fits. But for the most part, just having a guy sing about how he wants to be famous and have groupies, even though I'm, again, 1,000% sure they said boobies. But like they play it completely straight. I don't think they try to make a joke out of this song, which again, it's not like a very serious song, but I think they like play it as sincerely as if they had written it. And hearing his voice just off the bat go, "Boys call you sexy," just it's so fun. I like a good pop punk song. And here, I think the ha ha ha's, they're much subtler, they're much more polished. And every time before we go into the chorus, the line going into the chorus is, because see, when I was younger, I would say. And in the original version, it's at the same tone and volume and all that jazz as the rest of the lyrics, whereas here it's like, it sounds like it's got like this feedback effect sort of on it, so, and it's kind of in the background, not as much in the foreground as it is in the original. So I think that adds another element, and I like that a lot better. And I think this style of music, the pop punk style, I'm gonna double check here what sort of music Mayday Parade are qualified as singing. Listen, I call them pop punk because I think if you were on Vans Warped Tour at any time in the early 2000s, 2010s, you can qualify as pop punk. Oh my gosh, Mayday Parade are from Florida. That explains a lot of things, because I saw Mayday Parade at Warped Tour in Florida one time, and everyone was dressed head to toe in like black. Okay, black jeans, black shirt, you know the look. And then the lead singer had his nice long hair. He was wearing a tie-dye t-shirt and shorts, and then he either had on no shoes or sandals. I can't remember. Either way, he did not look like he got dressed with the rest of his band members, and I'm not convinced they knew him. Anyway, totally. Yeah, they qualify as a pop punk band, alternative rock, emo, any of those things. Same umbrella, essentially. So I think that style suits this chorus better, especially the "be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it." In a similar vein, I say this a lot. I think country music, or I don't know if I say it, but I do think it a lot. I think country music and pop punk music have a lot of similarities, which you might not realize, especially in terms of storytelling and that universal feeling. I think country music, especially old country music, which is what I prefer, is like singing, if you're singing about being on the plains and like the life of a traveling man and all this stuff. And like pop punk music is about like, and like the sense of, I'm not going to explain this well, but I saw that there was an essay written, or basically a lot of queer people identify with the cowboy because it was or gay men specifically, because it is an expression of masculinity that's not tied to your sexuality. It's tied to like the things you can do and like the cowboy man, but it's like not necessarily tied to a man loving a woman, where a lot of other expressions of masculinity are. And I think country music, especially singing about being out on the plains and the outlaw and all that stuff, is an appeal, and is an ideal of society, an ideal of a person, usually a man, but like just in general, an ideal of a person that sticks to their guns, no pun intended, and is confident and has this swagger and just oozes, everything you want to. They're just cool. But also the struggles that come along with that, and often the solitude and the hardships that come along with being your own person, and kind of being on the outside looking in, because you're quite literally on the plains. You're not in this town. Whereas with pop punk music, getting back to my point, finally, they sing about, it's to put it simply, outcast music for people who are outcasts. And back to the whole, you can be specific versus, being specific versus being not too specific. I think like, while not everyone can necessarily, pop punk music is stereotyped as being like, middle class white guys. And like, can I relate to Billy Joe Armstrong of Green Day's every single experience he's ever had? No, but I can relate to Green Day's overall feeling of being on the outside looking in and wanting to get out and do something bigger with yourself and do something better, and not wanting to conform to, the things that society says you should. I can relate to that. Billy Joe Armstrong and I, childhood, probably had very little in common, but it doesn't make it any less relatable. So I talked my way around. I think the point was in there somewhere, so I hope you all picked it up, okay? I put it down. I hope you picked it up. I did mention he gender swapped one lyric because he kept the "so boys call you sexy" instead of changing it to "girls," because I'm pretty sure Mayday Parade it's all dudes. Yeah, it looks like 5 dudes. I can count. It's 5 dudes in Mayday Parade. The only thing he keeps is when he says there's a line about boys. I'm gonna find it. Where is the line about boy? I'm looking at the lyrics. I'm so good at this. This is why I keep Eleanor around, because what happens? She says, I want to be the number one chick on the scene. So he just says he wants to be the number one boy on the scene. That's what it is. So that's the only thing he changes. I think it's fine. I think it helps fit the pacing a little better just on how he delivers it. Anyway, I've been talking for way longer than I thought I could, so I'm just going to give you my honorable mention real quick, which is Youngblood does a BBC Live Lounge. I really like the BBC Live Lounge. That's a great place for covers if you're ever really bored and want to listen to covers. But he does a cover of Senorita by Camila Cabello, but he mixes it in with Back to Black by Amy Winehouse and then Goosebumps by Travis Scott. And I don't think it's better than the original purely because Back to Black is in there, and I would be hard pressed to find a Back to Black cover that's better than the original. But I think it's better. I think it's better than the Senorita original by Camila Cabello, and it's hard to compare it to Goosebumps because the style is so different. Youngblood brings a very rock feel to this. This one gets a lot of brownie points just for ingenuity alone because, first of all, I don't know how you go from Senorita to Back to Black, and then how you go from Back to Black to Goosebumps by Travis Scott, and the transitions are so smooth that if he didn't put the titles in there, I would never know what song was coming next. I like his take on Goosebumps. I would listen to a full cover just because I don't think it would. I'd be interested to see how he did it because Madcon put in a rap verse very well. So maybe he could change the rap verse to fit the style of the music that he's doing. And then also he's got some nice strings, some nice, like, I think there's a violin and I think a cello maybe. So like some nice strings in there. So he's really adding a lot of elements to a very heavy song. That one was, none of them were heavy songs to begin with, but two, you wouldn't expect it to be there. So that's my honorable mention. My throat hurts a little bit. I will not be doing this again. So hopefully they've made a decision about Young Gravy, and Eleanor will be back next week because I'm tired of talking to myself. I do enough of that in my daily life. Anyway, we'll be back next week. Hopefully the two of us. Thanks for listening. I have been Kalina. This has been Don't Quote Me on That. And I will see you next time. Thanks for listening. Don't quote me on that. One day we'll have an outro, but it's not today.